Thank you for downloading this Real Agriculture podcast. Excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca.
Hi, I'm Amber Bell, and this is Real Agriculture. Today, I'm here with Dr. John Duynisveld with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So John is researching the effects of feeding kelp to cattle, and I believe you just finished your study on kelp and the methane production that occurs after feeding kelp. Is that correct, John?
Yes, that's correct. We had a trial that started in the fall of 2023 where we had bred heifers that we were feeding different levels of kelp to. So we had some with no kelp, some with 0.5%, 1%, and 2% kelp. So we kept track of all their growth and intake data. And then over the winter, we looked at how much methane they were producing.
And what inspired you to take on a project like that? Because you do a whole bunch of different things, I know, when it comes to studying cattle, and then you're a rancher as well. So yeah, what inspired that?
Well, there's just been such an interest in looking at different ways that we can try to reduce the amount of methane that comes from cows. They do produce a fair bit of methane, and there's different arguments about the true importance of that when you look at carbon sequestration and that sort of thing. But anyway, we here in the Maritimes we happen to have a lot of different sources of kelp that exist out there. The particular product that we are working with, it comes from a place on PEI, and the PEI government was interested in seeing what the potential was for this kelp product to reduce methane emissions. Oh, dear me, it'd be 2 or 3 years ago. There was a really big reduction in methane achieved in Australia with a seaweed product that they were using down there. So that kind of sparked the interest in what some of our local products might be able to do that way.
That's amazing. And just kind of briefly, what did the research look like? What did the project entail?
So we started off it was a group of, I think it was 20 heifers. And so we mixed this kelp with their diet every day. So they were getting a mix of silage and barley and a little bit of soybean, kind of balanced everything up for them. And so essentially, like for the production part of the trial, we actually used the automatic feed weighing system. So it weighs how much feed they eat, every mouthful of feed they eat, basically. So we can have pretty good data on how much they eat. We were weighing them regularly to get an idea on the weight gains and feed efficiencies. That was sort of the easy part of the trial. Because then after that, we put the cattle into the methane collection head boxes. So that's a little more complicated where we have the cows, they go into these, but essentially just their head itself goes into the box.
Hmm.
So they're in a stall that holds them still. So we adapt them to being comfortable in these head boxes, and for 24 hours we collect all the gases that come from these head boxes, and we sample every hour to see what the methane concentration is.
That's amazing.
So
And what were the results? Were there any results that you found surprising, particularly?
Well, I'll just back up a tiny step on this. So this particular kelp product that we were working with, um, a former colleague of mine at the Nova Scotia Agriculture College had done work with this almost 20 years ago now, and he had used artificial rumens with that. So basically, you have these glass jars that you put rumen fluid and all the rumen contents from a cow in there, and you can feed different things and measure some of what's going on. And interestingly, he had found 15% reduction in methane emissions with these artificial rumens. But this was before methane was really a big excitement. Like this is back in the early 2000s. Anyway, with our 1% kelp in the diet of these cattle, we found, depending upon which metric you're looking at, we found between 11 and 14% reduction in methane.
Wow, that's a
So,
lot.
well, it is. It is. I mean, when you look at the Australian data where they found like 80, 90% reductions, it seems like not a lot, but realistically, like, when we talk about the goal that has been set for beef production to reduce methane or reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030, that's getting us pretty well halfway there.
Right. So you're on the East Coast.
Yes.
Like you said, kelp is fairly readily available. You know, the West Coast would probably experience something similar. So what about all the prairie provinces? If, where would you see that going?
Well, actually, the place that we were working with, they ship all over North America. Like tractor trailer, those of stuff go out each week, and they're actually relatively small in the scheme of things too. So if you go, if you look, I know Newfoundland has places that do kelp. There's a couple of places in Nova Scotia that produce kelp, and it's all produced for a variety of different means, like reasons. Some of it's like food grade, some of it's for fertilizer for gardens, but there's a lot of sources of kelp that we can draw on from various parts, really around the world for that matter. But yeah, we do have
Right.
people that are in the business of this, and I know there's one of the places in Nova Scotia that actually some of their stuff is grown in tanks on land as well. Like so, there's opportunities to develop an industry around this if everything all works out economically and everything.
That's incredible. And so how exactly, like I know that there's a lot of nutrients in kelp. How exactly does it affect and impact the methane production in cattle?
Well, I don't know that we're 100% clear on the actual mechanism that works in there, but if what it, you know, we didn't look at the specifics of or organisms in the rumen were being impacted with this study, but in other projects, other research that's been done, there are certain types of bacteria that tend to do most of the methane production in the rumen, and these bacteria are impacted by some of the compounds that are in kelp, so they are not as effective or as productive as they would be if the kelp wasn't in the diet.
Wow, that's amazing. And did you notice any impact on the cattle outside of the actual methane reduction?
So we looked at intake and we looked at animal gains, and there was absolutely no difference in intake. And numerically, there were big differences in the animal gains, but our data had a lot of variability into it. So statistically, it was not a difference. But numerically, the animals that were supplemented with the kelp did grow a little bit from the ones that did not have the kelp. And
Right.
and that would be similar to some other research that's been done where essentially the the theory is that if you are not having the energy, like when methane is lost from the rumen, it's you can burn methane, it's natural gas, like there's energy in the methane. So essentially when the methane is not being lost from the rumen, it can potentially be converted into other compounds, energy compounds that the animal can use, like different fatty acids and that then can become energy sources to grow. So
Right. That's
again, we didn't see a significant difference in ours, but numerically it was there, and that would the numerical trend would agree with what other research has found for
and so I
those.
mean, coming from a rancher perspective, economically, you're going to be wanting to like have other benefits, whether that be maybe there's a bonus coming from the government, there's some grant funding maybe for it, or like, are there benefits that you would say you as a cattle producer would be willing to go and feed kelp to your cattle?
Well, kelp is a really good source of a lot of minerals and minerals in particular, things like selenium, which I realize in some parts of the world selenium is not a deficient mineral, but for us it is. It's like there's different copper. There's a lot of different microminerals, and where kelp is a plant source, those nutrients are quite available. Whereas quite often when you get like a mineral source, if it's something that's coming from a rock source, the availability tends to be relatively low. So as a mineral supplement, in addition to the methane reduction, there's sort of a benefit there that
Hmm.
we have some confidence in. People have been feeding kelp to animals literally for thousands of years.
Right.
Um, just largely like animals that grew up sort of on seaside areas or islands off Scotland and things like that. But yeah, but
Right.
so it's not like a totally novel concept for animals to eat seaweed and kelp.
No, and completely anecdotally, but we've fed kelp to our cattle when they come in, and in order to avert pink eye, and it's worked. I don't know the research on that, but we haven't had pink eye issues when we fed kelp to the cattle.
Uh,
So,
and I on my own farm I've found excuse me, I've found the same result actually with for preventing pink eye, and I I haven't seen any research that would give an indication why that would be, whether it's a micromineral issue or something else.
might be your next research study.
Well, possibly, yeah.
Do you foresee any challenges in scaling kelp feeding up in order for methane reduction if this was something that people wanted to take on?
Um, well, like it can be fed like as part of a mineral mix,
Hmm.
which would make it in that sense it could be added to a mineral and fed to animals that are getting a mineral. But again, that would probably depend on context. I don't I'm in the eastern part of Canada, we have tend to have smaller herds and it's relative and smaller areas where we're pasturing, so it might be a little easier to ensure there's sort of that steady supply of mineral. I'm not sure how that would work in some of the bigger
Like a feedlot
pasture
or
rangelands. Well, I'm thinking rangeland actually, which is the cow calf side of it is probably where a lot, there's a fair bit of potential to reduce methane, but.
so what are your next steps now that the this project is done? Where do you foresee this research going from here on out?
Well, the research was funded in part from Living Labs from Prince Edward Island, and their next step there is to take it onto farms and see how effectively they can get people to incorporate this, and then hopefully be able to measure sort of on a farm scale what's going on with the methane emissions from those cattle that are getting it. So,
That's incredible. Well, that's super fascinating stuff, John. I really appreciate your time. And yeah, thanks for joining us on Real Agriculture.
oh, it's been my pleasure. Always like to talk about what we're doing.
Did you enjoy this content? Well, don't forget to hit that like button. And you can always sign up for our free customizable newsletters at realagriculture.com/subscribe. You don't want to miss any of the content that's coming out.